So I've just actually clocked the Americans on this now, because I didn't actually know this little part of it, because I don't know why, but Jimmy Dore's not mentioned it. I thought Jimmy Dore might have mentioned it. And this is why Robert F. Kennedy Jr. lost his case in California with that Judge Thompson, where he tried to argue, constitutional rights or whatever. Now, they've got this, I forgot how you pronounce it, but they call it the DMCA Act or whatever. But it's not actually that modern. It goes back. 1996 is when this American Act actually was made. But I think there's a more modern version of it. There's a more modern version of it. But this 1996 Act, and then this Section 230, they're always talking about this Section 230, but there's different parts of it. It's got 230C. Now, this is where it threw me off, because I never thought to look for 230C, because when I did look at it, I just looked at this top bit here, because they always talk about this Section 230 in this for copyright. Like they won't. The platform is not going to be regarded as the copyright owner. So whenever there's a copyright claim, it's never between you and the platform. It's always between you and the claimant, the person who owns the copyright. So the middleman, the platform, never gets regarded as the person who's making the claim, or who's made the claim, or who you are counterclaiming against, right? And I thought that was it. I thought that was the whole thing that was giving the platform this sort of immunity or whatever, but mainly only for copyright. Because if they take an action against you, then if that platform takes an action against you, which isn't a copyright and doesn't necessarily involve another person, because like if you've uploaded something and they remove it, they've performed an action, and they're responsible for their own actions, right? If it's lawful or not. Now this is where this other bit comes in, because it's actually this Section 230C2, right? Because as far as I'm concerned, if it's not a copyright issue, then, actually, for copyright claims, all it says is that they won't be treated as a third party, right? They won't be treated as the third party. Now, the thing is, if you are using the right to petition, 1688 Bill of Rights, and you've got petition material, you're protected from copyright, okay? So if YouTube take it down, right, if YouTube take it down for copyright purposes, it doesn't matter whether they are, it doesn't matter about if anyone's raised a copyright claim or not, because you can't have an action against you, right, from anyone. You can't have a action for copyright at all. So it doesn't really matter who does an action or whatever. So it's YouTube who take it down. So because yours is protected material, YouTube can't take it down themselves. It doesn't matter if they're a third party or not. It doesn't matter who they are. They can't take it down, right? So it doesn't matter if they're doing it on behalf of someone or they're not doing it on behalf of on someone or whatever. But if they take it down, that is an action against you, and that's contempt, right? So they've done multiple contempts against my channel anyway, right? Now, but that copyright thing doesn't actually say anything about constitutionally protected. Doesn't say nothing about being constitutionally protected. So when YouTube take it down and it's constitutionally protected, they're actually breaking the law, and it's contempt, right? And now, this is when we move on to the other part, this Section 230C2, which is not about copyright. Section 230C2 is not about copyright. And this is where they're bringing this. This is to do with constitutionally protected content, right? So, like, constitutionally protected content, right? This is what Jimmy Dore has not mentioned, which I didn't know, and what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I haven't heard him. He knew it, and that's what his argument's been around, but he never indicated to this part. Well, he did say Section 230, but he never said 230C2, right? He was still always talking about that third-party part of it. And when I looked at it, I didn't bother reading it all because I didn't think there was anything else to read. I only thought there was that bit that everyone's been talking about, being treated as a third party, right? So what it actually says down here, so this is what YouTube are using, right? And this is how YouTube are acting extremely arrogantly, without any accountability. Like, they're treating us literally like flicking us like little fleas, right? They're not having to answer any questions, not having to reply to anyone. When you put a counterclaim in, it just automatically gets rejected, and they're reckoning that someone checked it when they didn't. And why they're literally throwing weight around, even if you start telling them, oh, I've got a petition channel, it's political class. Now they're letting you categorise it in political class on ads. If you go through Google Ads, they'll let you categorise it because it has to be done from law for elections, right? But really, it should have to be for channels as well, right? Now, this is where they've got too confident. They've got too confident that we're all little flicks and we can just all be flicked, right? And they don't have to reply to us or anything because they think that they've got this power from this protection. And this is where it is, right? So it says that Section 230C2 further provides that they call it Good Samaritan. Well, what's Good Samaritan about it? Good Samaritans don't go around and break the Constitution, do they, right? Good Samaritan protection, and this is against every single. This is against, like, the basis of a government. In fact, the justices and the courts and the local courts and trial by jury existed before proper parliament, right? Before they even had elections to elect MPs, right? When only the bishops were going to meet in Parliament and the Lords, right? Before they had a proper House of Commons, right? Where we could even elect people, knights and that. There existed the courts and justice and a fair trial, right? So the court system and the justices, right, it exists before Parliament proper, right? And what they've actually been doing is there's no judicial system. It's like what they've done is for media content, right? They've suddenly made it that if it's anything to do with media, right, which is like, pictures, artwork, writing, whatever, or on the internet, right, that effectively there is no law. It's like there is no court. Now, I know that there is courts because people have art lawyers and media lawyers and they do go to court, but not that many people go to court with YouTube because they're in America, right? And they've got this copyright claim board that people can use overseas, but they only had that after YouTube had sorted out a lot of problems. In fact, I was the main people who wrote to YouTube. I sent in a big golden letter with loads of legal points about the copyright, and they updated the system so that half the time you never got a copyright strike, you didn't have to go to copyright school. And it was really decent after that. I was uploading stuff and I was getting loads of permission and consent to use a lot of things. And I never, ever, hardly after they updated that, I never got a strike on copyright ever, hardly, ever. And I never got sent to that stupid copyright school. And my channel never got threatened. And that was I actually did do something towards that. But then, after that, Neil Mohan got appointed to be chief executive, and that woman, that Susan Wojcinski or Wazowski or whatever she's called, that Polish name, that Susan Wojak or whatever she was called, she wasn't the chief executive anymore. And then a little while after Neil Mohan had been on, that's when my channel got taken down, right? After I was the person who sort of made him sort out the copyright thing, right? And it's like on the internet, there's no court, so you're not getting a fair trial or any justice. But so that's kind of making it like on the internet there isn't really a fair trial or justice, right? Now, I know you might be saying, well, what's the point in having black belt barrister, like, for example, an art and law media barristers and so forth? Well, actually, I don't think they do that many YouTube cases, to be honest, particularly not in England. I think it's mainly to do with paintings and, making films which are just, distributed or sold or whatever, maybe Amazon or whatever, I don't know. But, the thing is, this is an American platform, but we've got it in England, but the actual legal basis it's founded on now is against the law of England, because in Magna Carta, you cannot be punished or have a legal action against you without a fair trial, right? And we don't even get a jury now. We don't even get a trial by our equals. It's a magistrate who's never been anyone's equal ever, but because we're in another country, we can't really do it about it here. Well, we could take YouTube to court here and say, because in England we've got Magna Carta and we've got the confirmation of the charters, so you have to have, if anyone's raising a claim against you, but this is what they're bringing in now. This is what they brought in with Russell Brand, and this is where Lucy Fraser, right, she, in a committee meeting, right, if there's a court case going on, like in the Royal Courts of Justice, right, when they have a committee meeting that's filmed on Parliament, they're not allowed, before they can talk about a court case or anything which might affect the court case or anyone involved in a court case, like the defendant or the claimant, they've got to get permission from the Speaker of Parliament, right? He's got to give them consent, because they've said this in the debates. They've said, we've got consent from the Speaker to talk about the ULEZ, even though there's a legal case in the court about ULEZ, right? It was at the same time. Now, how is it that Lucy Fraser can write to YouTube when there's a case against Russell Brand, which affects him and gets his channel taken down? His own private personal finances, right? Because that's the matter which she's writing him to about is the charges against him, right? But they're not allowed. She's writing to him about a court case which is live or it's started by the police, right? And that have just and an MP has acted to affect the defendant, his livelihood, right? But in Parliament, in the committee meeting, they said that, we've got to be careful about what we say about ULEZ, because there's a case going on in the courts and we have to get permission from the Speaker to do it. So they need Lucy Fraser get permission from the Speaker to write to YouTube to affect the defendant, Russell Brand, in his case, which, he hadn't been proven guilty of it. No. Well, it affects the defendant. What she did affected the defendant, and it was a matter concerning the case of the defendant, because if he hadn't been accused of anything, she wouldn't have wrote to him. She wrote to him concerning charges against him, right? And that actually is illegal, what Lucy Fraser did. And she's posing in photos next to these judges like Peter Lodder, KC, like, I'm a legal person. I'm a KC. I'm a qualified KC. But actually, Lucy Fraser actually doesn't know what she's doing. And I don't really want to go into this too much because I've done another video about this separately, but Gordon Brown made it so that he didn't want Parliament to be a court anymore, right? And he scrapped it all, and he got the Supreme Court and scrapped all the appellate jurisdiction, right? He didn't want Parliament to have any judicial functions. And we're not being allowed to do them in the House of Commons. They won't publish anything to do with court cases on e-petitions, right? And this is what I'm saying, but Keir Starmer's wanting to give Parliament judicial powers, like, we can take your bank account down, or we can turn, take your driving licence off you, or these other things, which can only usually be done through a fair trial. I don't think Keir Starmer believes in a fair trial. He's undoing what Gordon Brown did, because he wants Parliament, the House of Commons, to have judicial authority to make judicial actions, because that's a judicial action, is taking someone's thing, unless they've done something. They have to have done something wrong and be accused of something, and they have to have a right to defend themselves, right? But he just wants to be able to do it automatically, right? And even the House of Lords used to let people have fair trial. So, I don't think Keir Starmer, he doesn't know what he's doing. And I don't mean to say that, he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, he knows what he's doing, as in the sense of, like, I want to take people's bank accounts from them and driving licenses, right? Just with powers. But what I mean to say that he doesn't know what he's doing is that he's got no concept of the. If he was in a ship at sea, right, and he said, right, I want to sail my boat onto the island, or I want to do this, I want to, I want to go to the bottom of the ocean, right, or, I want to sail around in circles, or I want to drop anchor here, or I want to get in a fishing boat and go catch some fish. There are things that I want to do, right, I might strip off naked and jump into the water, but he's on a boat, right, and there's water, and then you've got gravity, right? And there are these things around you, which it's not like a virtual reality world where you can, it's not like the Matrix where you can go, I don't want to be in a boat in water anymore. I just want to be, like in space with Russell, with I don't know, with Branson or something. Oh, I'm with Branson in space now, like click, and now I'm not, and now I'm on Mars. Like you could, but no, you're in a government called Parliament, right? There are existing laws which you've got to take seriously and comply with, and they've got to be coherent and make sense. And, you're on a ship, you're in water. There are things there that are real, right? And you can't just say, oh, wouldn't it be great if I could just, like, appear in a daffodil field, right? And then click my fingers and then, I'm in the water, scuba diving. There's the laws of reality, right? Like gravity, and he wants to defy them. And that's what I mean by that he doesn't know what he's doing. He's saying, I want a box of chocolates, or I want to do this, I want to do that. All these MPs saying, we want assisted suicide bill, and we want this bill put through, and we want that bill put through. But he can't actually do it because it's not coherent with the law. Right? It can't be done. Like, you're on a ship and I want it to fly up into the sky, like on Stardust. But you can't do that. And this is what these people are doing. They're actually living by wishful thinking. They've got a term for it, which is exclusive cognizance, which I think that it means, like, just exclude facts that you don't want to have to account for, let's just, float off into space. Well, we got to account for gravity. Well, with exclusive cognizance, I could exclude gravity from my basis and it wouldn't exist. Well, it's not actually possible to do that. Wishful thinking can do that, but that's a type of heroin thinking when you're on a heroin high and you think you can do anything because you don't have to think about the bad things that are stopping you from doing it, right? And that's the problem with Starmer. He's not actually living in the real world. He's living in a fantasy world of a Labour Party that thinks that it can just have things that it wants without the reality of how you're going to get them, right? So, this is why Keir Starmer's government is bound to fail, because what they're doing is not possible. He said it's not possible, and there are certain safeguards against these people being able to do those kind of things, like, Magna Carta and the confirmation of the charters and things like that. So, that's the thing. And going back to the American Constitution, right, that was a bit of a conversation off topic, but coming back to this Constitution of America, right, it says in this, right, this is what it says, right, that it shall, it's kind of, the things that are constitutionally protected, that they can even remove things which are constitutionally protected, right? Well, if it's not constitutionally protected, then is it? There is no constitutional protection if they can remove it, right? Therefore, they're trying to say that there is no constitutional protection, and to say that will be to say that there's no constitution, right? Which they can't say that, because it is the Constitution and it is protected. This guy, Sir Malcolm Jack, he was one of the editors 2 editions ago of this Usage of Parliament book, the parliamentary practice book, Sir Malcolm Jack, and he was quoted. He's got an internet page for one of the universities, whether it's Oxford or Cambridge or whatever, and he's got this. They do this interview with him, and he says, because he's obviously written about parliamentary privilege because he does a Constitution Society, right? And he's like going. He says, this is his quote. He says, "A privilege which is not abused is no privilege at all," right? So he's saying that, you know, if you haven't got any special rights or immunities, you know, if you're not going to make use of them, then there's no point having them, right? So, like, what I'm trying to say is, with that, is that if you've got loads of media files, right, and, you know, none of them are breaking the law, then no one's going to remove them, because there's no reason to remove them, is there? Right? Because you would only remove something if there was a problem arose, right? Now, the point of having privileges is that it's protected, right? But if there wasn't a problem with it, then you wouldn't need that protection. The protection is only there so that if it cannot be removed, and you've got certain rights for, you know, so there's no point in it, in having the Constitution existing. It exists because it's allowed to do certain things that other things can't, and that's the point of it. In fact, it's the whole purpose of it is to be able to do certain things which otherwise it wouldn't be able to do, you know? So anyway, Section 230C2 further provides that Good Samaritan protection, well, it's not actually Good Samaritans, because, it's, you know, Good Samaritans are kind of like charity work, and it's trying to make out that it's not, you know, the Good Samaritans don't have any authority, do they? They're just Good Samaritans, they're just doing it out of goodwill and kindness, right? They're not judges, they're not justices, and they're definitely not MPs or senators, right? Good Samaritan protection, you know. So it's kind of like, so these platforms, this part, in fact, is almost giving platforms their own kind of like political power, but political power to take away our political power. And when you've got one big platform that's taking away everyone's political power, it's actually becoming one entity or body. It's not like the whole point of the Constitution is that each individual person has got political power if they want to use it, right? But by that platform having political power, which can stamp out many individuals' political power, it's actually like creating a political party. Can you imagine, like, if you had, you know, an MP who was for a political party, but no one else could go to the surgery except, you know, people who voted Labour. No one else. The surgery was only for the people that won. YouTube is acting like a political party and deciding what all the policies are going to be when no one voted for them. And then people can't retaliate and come back with things to challenge it if it's just taking them all down. So it's almost like a political monster in a way. But anyway, let's read these. I just want to read these list. I've been going on for 23 minutes now, and I just want to get to this list of items, right? So it's saying that YouTube's got protection from civil liability. I don't know what civil liability is. That's not criminal liability, though, is it? Civil liability is not criminal liability. Civil liability is like only tort. Civil liability is like a tort, right? And I don't even think it's like a speciality claim, because speciality claim is different, right? But it just actually didn't say criminal liability there. It doesn't say criminal liability. I've just realised that important word. No, it says civil. So that's in like Mr. Smith versus Mr. Johnson, or me versus Neil Mohan, right? But only in civil. provides Good Samaritan protection from civil liability for operators of interactive computer services, that's YouTube, right, in the voluntary good faith removal. So that means that they can just do it themselves if they want to. Or is that asking you to remove it in good faith? They're saying to you, oh, do you mind removing this, please? And if you want to agree with us or not. I don't know whether this is good, whether whether YouTube are going to volunteer to remove it or asking us to volunteer to remove it ourselves. Or moderation of third-party material. Right, well, that would be us then, third-party. The operator considers to be obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. What's otherwise objectionable? That means literally anything. Otherwise objectionable, whether or not such material is constitutionally protected. Now, what I was going to say to that, and this is the main point that I wanted to get to, right? This is my main point. If you've got a channel, right, the channel might be constitutionally protected because you can have constitutional protection, right? And your videos, right, they might all be okay. Now, you might have one video which is, right, you might have one video which is lewd, obscene, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, or harassing, right? Now, but your other content might not be. Now, if it meets any of those criteria, then they can only really take that video down. Because if none of the other content is harassing, violent, excessively filthy, lascivious, rude, obscene, right, then it cannot be taken down, right, if it isn't any of those criteria, right? So that means that they can't really take the entire constitutionally protected channel down. Only something on it which is violent, harassing, or whatever. This is where they come up with a strike system, right? But then they've got this other part which says otherwise objectionable. But what otherwise? Otherwise objectionable. How do you define that? And this is when they're coming in with all these arguments that, YouTube aren't really telling people why their things have been taken down or what's wrong with it. And why YouTube has got this, so it's otherwise objectionable. Their lawyers, therefore, will say, well, I would have to define it because, it's just otherwise objectionable. But objectionable means that there is some kind of object, right? And otherwise objectionable, but are they going to tell you whether it is objectionable or not? Are they actually going to come up with anything and tell you what the object of their removal is, right? Now, this is interesting because according to this otherwise objectionable, they might, now, if there's one thing in your channel that was wrong but nothing else with the rest of it, then they might say, oh, well, the rest of it is now otherwise objectionable, right? But they might not have to give any reason at all whatsoever, right? Even if it's constitutionally protected, but then there is no constitutional protection. But this is the thing, right? This is the thing. Firstly, this only applies to the actual type of content what's uploaded. This is not copyright, okay? This is not a copyright claim. So the copyright claim part only means that they won't be regarded as the uploader. And that actually doesn't have anything to do with constitutional protection for copyright at all. There's nothing in here that gives them protection that if they remove something on a copyright claim reason, there's nothing to say that if yours is constitutionally protected, right, because you've got the right to copyright use, like in England, you've got the Copyright Act 1911, Section 20, right? You can use whatever you want in a political announcement or whatever, right? Then if they remove it on a copyright basis, then that's contempt, That's a contempt in England, right? And that's got absolutely nothing to do with what type of material it is. That's to do with the fact that you've got the right to use anyone else's material, right? So every single copyright strike that I've had removed by YouTube is a contempt. But getting on to this point here that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., right? This bit here that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., this will be why he lost his argument with that Judge Thompson, because I didn't know this at the point that they've got this, whether it's constitutionally protected or not. And I don't know how they got this through Congress. 1996 was when not many people were savvy what was going on around in the world or what was on the internet, what was going on in Parliament or in Congress. Because even around the year 2000, 2001, 2003, everyone was in these forums, and people used to go on the internet and look for forums and join forums. So this would have applied to like administrators and moderators of forums, right? And people used to have arguments with moderators and admins of forums, right? But everyone wasn't clued into what the government were up to and what's going on, right? Because I think if everyone would have clocked this and known about being interested in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and things like that, they would have never got this through. They would have been absolutely hell on. And this is what's leading to this attitude in the government now of this, like Lucy Fraser going, oh, I'm the Secretary of State, I'll just write to Russell Brand and I'll write to YouTube, Musk Grumble, and I'll start threatening them like, oh, maybe you should, demonetize him or take his channel down. Just a minute. For what reason, Lucy? Oh, because he's been accused of sexual offences. Just a minute, Lucy, right? So, because he was questioned by the police and he's now got a case in the courts, you are going to intervene in that case as a minister in Parliament, get involved in the justice system, not just having photographs taken with Peter Loddy KC, right? Showing off, oh, I'm a legal person in England, I'm high up, I hang around with judges, I'm a KC, I go to chambers, I'm a lawyer, right? Are you, Lucy? Right? Now you're an MP. You've just written a letter to a private platform which has caused a person to lose his livelihood and income, right? Because of a live case which was initiated through the police against him, right? Which has just affected him, right? Now, why is it that you didn't ask permission from the Speaker of Parliament if you could act as an MP to make a statement which affects a live legal case? In fact, the live legal case is what caused you to write the letter, Lucy. Why is it when they're in a debate in Parliament, right, in a committee, that no one's allowed to speak about a live case in the courts, right, touch upon it or affect it or the defendant or the defendant or the plaintiff, right, until they've got permission from the Speaker from Parliament? They're not allowed to mention it in that debate if there's an ongoing live court case without permission from a Speaker, because it might affect the plaintiff or the defendant and the outcome of the case, right? Why have you just written a letter to YouTube, right, which has caused Russell Brand's livelihood to be lost, right, because of a legal case, right? Riddle me that, Lucy, in Cambridge. Riddle me that. That's illegal. And this is what Keir Starmer's doing now. This is exactly what Keir Starmer's doing. He wants to be like Lucy Fraser. Oh, I'll take someone's driving licence from them without a fair trial. Why? Oh, because we recorded on the camera doing something, or they haven't paid the bills or whatever. No, they go to court and then they have a trial, and then the judge says they've been naughty or not, and then the judge takes their driving licence from them, or the judge takes their money from them, Keir, right? No, but I want to do it in Central in Parliament. No, Keir, that means that Parliament is becoming a court, right? Gordon Brown scrapped Parliament having judicial decisions on persons. He wanted to get rid of it. In fact, Starmer wants to get rid of the House of Lords, right? And he wants to get all Labour MPs in there. This is where Starmer, right? He he's been a barrister, right? He's graduated university. He's kicked a ball around. He's knocked around with some legal cases defending protesters or whatever. Then he's gone and done some really important work in Ireland with the police and got into the Privy Council cases. And then, he got a tip. And then he got in charge of the Crown Prosecution Service. It's very important. But all the time that he's not knowing the Crown Prosecution Service aren't even enforcing privileges through the courts at all. Right? See, he doesn't really know what he's doing. And mainly, if he did, it's like heroin. If you take that much heroin, you're happy and there are no problems because you don't have to think about the problems. Exclusive cognizance, right? It's like walking on what Keir Starmer's effectively doing, he's doing like a tightrope trick. What he's doing is putting a blindfold on, right, so he can't see anything, right, and then he's walking across a tightrope, right, between two skyscrapers and going, oh, aren't I doing well? Aren't I doing well? And everyone's at the bottom going, oh, look at it's like David Blaine. Look at this, the fearless Keir Starmer. And he's up there. He's the Prime Minister of England, walking on a tightrope between two buildings, right? And everyone thinks it's brilliant. He's like a man of steel. But that's only because he can't see the dangers. And this is the thing. He doesn't know what he's actually doing as Prime Minister. He's actually doing the impossible because it's not possible. You can't actually do it. It is not possible to do. And if he tried to, make powers to do it, there are no powers. It's fiction. It's like wishful thinking. Oh, it's like the assisted suicide bill. Oh yeah, we could do that. No, you can't do that because all acts in England are enacted through by the grace of God, right? And the first word from God was, or the sixth word from God was, "Thou shalt not kill." Right, but Keir Starmer wants to put an assisted suicide bill through where you do kill people, a lot with Lord Falconer, and you can't do it. And that Batley MP Kim, whatever you call it, Kim Leadbeater, you can't do it. But it's wishful thinking. It's exclusive. They're trying to exclude all facts and truth that would prevent them from being able to do it. If they ignore them, then they hope they don't exist, but they do exist. This is the thing, So, these people, and this is what the Americans have done. Whether or not such material is constitutionally protected. Well, therefore, that means it's not constitutionally protected, and actually, they haven't changed the Constitution, so it is constitutionally protected still because the Constitution is still there, right? And it's still protecting things, right? So therefore, it must, if it is constitutionally protected and qualifies from it, then it has to be constitutionally protected because the Constitution is still there protecting it, right? So this surely has to be a defect in legislation. And if we went back to 1996 and they were trying to get this through and everyone knew about it like now, and they had Jimmy Dore on YouTube and George Galloway and Russell Brandon, that they wouldn't get it through. But yet, this is why we're in the situation we are in now. This is why, they're trying to get these things through, and they can't. But yeah, they're continuing to still do it with wishful thinking, and a lot of it's going to have to be ripped back out again and overdone, like Donald Trump did to Biden. Donald Trump just undid everything that Biden did, and well, that's what we're going to have to do here now. We're going to have to undo it all. Anyway, this doesn't apply in England either, because we don't have this is the American Constitution, so this cannot and does not apply in England. So anything that's protected under English rights is still protected in England. And anyway, it says Section 230C2 further provides Good Samaritan protection from civil liability. Well, this is a thing. If you're uploading media, right, which is protected under the right to petition, it's a contempt, right? It's a contempt. That's criminal, right? A contempt is criminal because there's no arrest in civil proceedings. There's no arrest on mesne process of civil proceedings anymore. People don't get arrested for civil issues anymore. But if you contempt court in civil proceedings, you can get arrested because it becomes criminal, right? So if you break the Constitution, right, it's criminal. It's not civil. So there's still a criminal liability. So YouTube are prosecutable for contempts because it's criminal, not civil. So they are criminally liable for removing content. Now, if they want to get the testicles out to remove it, if they want to get the balls to remove it, right, do it. But they're criminally liable. They're criminally liable. And I don't actually think that, if one of your videos fits this criteria here, like, harassing or obscene or filthy or lewd or whatever, then this gives them the right to remove that item, but not items that aren't lewd or harassing or whatever. So on the basis of this, they can't take the whole channel down. And by the way, if they've already approved a load of videos and it passed their scans, and a lot of their videos have been up there for years and they've already been checked and YouTube's already approved them, then how can they suddenly, out of the blue, just suddenly decide that, they can't suddenly say it's filthy, lewd, lascivious, obscene, or violent, if it's already been checked and approved as not being, right? Now, can they say otherwise objectionable? Well, but it wasn't otherwise objectionable, was it? If a video was uploaded and it had been there for 10 years and it's been scanned and checked by YouTube and it was not otherwise objectable, then why would it suddenly become otherwise objectionable? Unless you've got like suddenly this COVID thing which suddenly brings in, certain things suddenly they can remove. But other than that, and actually, I'd like to see that argued out in court, because remember, right, you can take YouTube to court. Now, I actually truly believe that Neil Mohan and Carol Vasquez delusionally and wrongly, actually in La La Fantasy Land, who do actually believe that all this constitutionally protected stuff that is, political rights, this is why they've just been ignoring us, because they actually believe that no one can do anything to them because they've got immunity, right? But they haven't. They haven't got any, because when you remove someone's petition material in England, it's a criminal offence. It is a contempt. Contempt is criminal, right? It's not civil liability. They ain't got any protection. So Neil Mohan is living in a land of fantasy, right? And he should get on a plane tomorrow morning and fly to India, because if he stays in America, he's going to prison. Because I can't see in America how, if you make a contempt against someone, that's criminal. It has to be criminal. So whoever's actually made this act didn't actually know what the fuck they were doing properly. They actually didn't know what they were doing. And YouTube have been blindly misled for a long time. In fact, not that many. There was mainly copyright issues before Mohan started. There was a lot of copyright issues and people getting copyright school, getting videos pulled down, channels threatened to be pulled down, and then all that went away. It just stopped, and that CCB website started, and there were hardly literally none. I got some videos on copyright, but it was all like, we'll let you use it, we'll let you use it, we'll let you use it. I even got some removed without any strikes as well, 1 or 2 times. But other than that, I actually didn't have any problems until Neil Mohan started. And I was quite friendly with him at first. I was like, there's a new guy, and I used to tag him because, he he was brand new, and he didn't have any followers or anything, but he had a thing, and I thought, oh, like, you know, I'll write to Neil Mohan. But then I don't know what happened with my channel, but I was actually giving YouTube a lot of feedback at that point, trying to help out the channel, and then my channel got pulled, and then they wouldn't have any they just wouldn't enter any dialogue or resolution, right? In England, right, what they've done is criminal offence, and there's no protection under their law for it. And, you know, it's contempt. Neil Mohan needs to be extradited to England, because it's actually... There's probably more channels than mine that have been removed that would qualify for protection in England, right? And that's actually more serious offence than Julian Assange. It is. What Julian Assange did was a very serious matter, right? But only as serious as contempts under constitutional law of England, which is criminal, not civil, right? So Neil Mohan and Carol Vasquez need to be extradited to England to face criminal charges of digital platforms. And I know that none of the people in English government will want to, because they liked all this trial without a jury, trial without justice, automatic justice, what Keir Starmer's wanting to do himself, even though we had Parliament as a court, but Gordon Brown scrapped it, and it seems that Keir Starmer wants to bring it back in again, even though all these MPs who advocate all this kind of like government intervention, but all the time government is saying, oh, we won't intervene in legal cases. We're not going to intervene in legal cases. And in fact, if we touch on matters of legal cases which could affect them or any of the participants, then they have to get permission from the Speaker. But yet Lucy Fraser did not get permission from the Speaker to write to YouTube to affect Russell Brand's personal livelihood and channel, resulting because of a ongoing legal case. In fact, it was the legal case that prompted her to write to him, right? Which you can't build that. That's not legal, and this is a problem with Ofcom, and this is the problem with that woman on Ofcom. Someone's just talked about that woman on Ofcom. There's Michael Grade, and there's another guy. There's that Michael Grade guy, and then there's another guy. I'm not going to find it now because it's in my notepad. I'll find it. Wait a minute, I'll look. So we've got this guy who's got Ofcom Watch.
Now with it.
The end of free speech online. Norman Richmond Mackenzie, director of Ofcom Watch, speaks with Emma Dunwell of Resistance GB about the massive powers coming from the Online Safety Act. But there was so we got Ofcom board of members, right? Ofcom board of members, right? So we've got Lord Grade of Yarmouth, Michael Grade, right? I wrote to him. And then we've got this Tamara Ingram, and then we've got this Lord Allen of Hallam, and then we've got Karen Baxter. She looks like she should be on GB News. Natalie Black. She looks like she should be also presenting on GB News or something. Oh, this Melanie Davis, this is it, Melanie Davis. So they were complaining about this Melanie Davis, who are wanting to crack. She's a chief executive. Melanie Dawes joined Ofcom as an executive board member and chief executive on the 2nd of March 2020. So she's been there for quite a long time. I don't like Ofcom. I don't think they're very effective. They're just there. They're not there to take things down that we complain about. They're there to effectively like stop anyone getting their hands on the controls of the regime, basically the public from the electors from having an electoral power. She's held senior roles across civil service, also she's a civil servant. Civil servants now running the country and trying to make processes where there's no hearing or fair trial. Yeah, so she's this Melanie. So it's this Melanie Dawes, not Davis. Melanie Dawes. So she's trying to do things with Ofcom and get things put through government that basically, effectively, give the government. You see, the government. What the American government have done with this is that they've given these platforms sort of powers that they kind of want themselves, but they couldn't really have because we've got fair trials and things like that. Can you imagine if the government just said, right, you're guilty, and you're guilty, and you hadn't had any fair trial or anything? They just listened to your phone and then said, right, we're putting you in prison, right? Which they're starting to do a lot of these type of things now in Scotland, like if talking in your own home, all these kind of things. The way the government are going at the moment is completely disregarding the Magna Carta and the English law, which cannot be removed. It cannot be repealed or removed. And a lot of the oaths in the government, they had judicial oaths, but the oaths in the government, according to William Prynne, didn't come in until Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth I because of religious allegiance. Because of the Pope separating from the Church of England, and they didn't want people to have allegiance to the Pope because the Pope had a jurisdiction and authority, right? And with that jurisdiction and authority, there were privileges, a little bit like the right to petition privileges, but under the See of Rome. So, if certain if people were under the authority and jurisdiction of Rome on a mission in England, they had protection of the Pope, right? And then you've got this kind of Henry VIII, put himself as the head of the Church of England, and then there was this fight against who are you serving? Are you serving Pope Francis or the King? You have to make a decision. That's why they brought all the oaths into Parliament, right? And they make a big thing about these oaths now. Pledge allegiance to King Charles, his heirs and successors, right? Like all little good knights, good little barons and good little justices, and they think they're serving the crown, but all that really is mainly so they didn't follow another religion, Pope Francis. The ironic thing now is that Charles has just had some kind of Muslim or Islam ceremony in one of the churches that people were kicking off about, and then they're building a mosque in the Lake District, or on the edge of the Lake District, right? And then they're welcoming all these religions in and saying, "Oh, you're welcome, and you can build all your religious institutions." And they're now starting to try and mix them together, right? Now this is a bit ridiculous because really, right? Are they wanting all those religious institutions to is Charles trying to get them to all swear allegiance to him, right, and not to whoever was the previous rulers of those religions, or do all those religions serve a shirt and tie and suit, right? It's very interesting now that they're welcoming all these religions in and wanting more of it, and even letting them build their temples when in Saudi Arabia they weren't even allowing any churches, right? When previously there was a big thing about following other religions, and we wouldn't actually have the oath of allegiance if they hadn't have, not in Parliament, only through the judicial system, right? They wouldn't have had the big deal about oaths of allegiance to the king, his heirs and successors, right? If there hadn't have been that religious split, right? Because they didn't want them to serve the other religions. Now, are they, Sadiq Khan, for example, is a Muslim, right? But who does he take precedence over as the Mayor of London sworn in? Charles or, Prophet Muhammad or whatever, or whether he's Islamic or whatever, an Allah or whatever, right? Who is his religious God? Because in the Christian faith, it's your allegiance to Charles, and you don't even swear allegiance to Jesus. Charles III for the grace of God, and not the Pope Francis, right? And that's what the oaths for. But now, when everyone says the oath, they're not actually thinking really so much of religion. It's purely like Charles, we follow Charles as our master, right? And is that really what they're doing with Sadiq Khan now, with a Muslim mayor? Sadiq Khan is becoming knighted. It's almost like a mergence of Muslim and royalty. And then, is Sadiq Khan... he has to take the oath of allegiance, doesn't he? He has to take the oath. He can say his religion. He doesn't have to say... You can do an affirmation, can't you? Now I think you can do it in the court. You can do an affirmation, so it's like you can swear in, Prophet Muhammad or Allah or whatever, but under allegiance to Charles. It's almost kind of like making Charles. It's almost kind of like, we swear allegiance to Charles, no matter what our religion is. It's almost kind of like the splitting the Pope from the church, right? And I know I've gone way off topic on this subject now, but I might as well, I'm kind of on this now, so I might as well throw this in. This is just an example, right? Well, we're talking about the government's changing the law against the Constitution, and we're talking about like Magna Carta and the founding of constitutions in America and England, and what the government can and can't do in law, like in this stupid act, this stupid Communications Act, right? So, when the Pope is the head of the religion, right? So religiously, all of the bishops and abbots, they serve the head of the church, right? But then in England, they've got the king, right? But what happens is Henry VIII. I've seen a program on this anyway. At least I've seen a TV drama for it. Henry VIII. He's like, no, the Pope's not the boss, the head of the church. I am now, right? And then they don't want all these people following the Pope, right, under the authority of Rome, the jurisdiction of Rome, right? They want them to follow the jurisdiction of the king in church and state, right, in all matters, right? Now, don't you kind of think in a way that what Tony Blair and this World Economic Forum craftily and sneakily and cleverly are kind of doing now, in a way with Charles, also, can't speak anything wrong about the king, but, intellectual pursuits, you must ponder these things, right? Isn't it a little bit like what they're doing with Sadiq Khan and all the Muslims and then all the Islamic? Don't you think they're kind of like flaking them off, sort of away from, having their respective gurus to Charles? Because, Charles, have come to England, have allegiance to Charles, and, it doesn't matter if you don't like Christianity, Charles can be the saviour and sovereign of all religions, in fact, all religions swear allegiance to the supreme leader, this is the thing, now we've got Islam in the church, we've got Muslims in the church, we've got churches within churches, we've got mosques inside churches now. Isn't it a little bit like Henry VIII move that Charles is doing now in a way with people like Sadiq Khan? Because it's all like, pledging allegiance to Charles, right? Not that there's anything wrong with that, right? But they would have their head of their religion, wouldn't they? But what Charles is saying is that I welcome in your religion if you swear allegiance to me, right? Which is kind of like, step away from the Pope and come to Charles, isn't it? It's like, step away from Pope Francis and swear allegiance to Charles, right? That's kind of like it's the thing they've got going now. But yet Sadiq Khan's broken every law in London there is, every single ancient liberty of London. Sadiq Khan's broke it. They had illegal road signs as well. Sadiq Khan's been charging people with illegal signs for ULEZ, they call him the Nightmare. So, and then at the same time, you've got this kind of like, these current ministers who don't actually really know properly what they're doing. It's all wishful thinking. These women like, this Melanie Dawes, right? Melanie Dawes and this Angela Dean and this Natalie Black and this Karen Baxter. These are people who don't really appreciate, understand, or fully comprehend where we are in England and what the actual laws are and what can be done and what can't be done. And they're kind of like ushering in this kind of like sort of, we vote for MPs. We elect people who the public choose. And a lot of these people aren't elected. None of these people are elected. In fact, even Lord Grade of Yarmouth, he's not elected. Not one of these Ofcom people are elected. No one's voted for them, but they're actually acting like they should be deciding what the next acts of law are and getting them put through Parliament and deciding what stuff gets taken down and not. It's a Lucy Fraser mindset. And what Lucy did, she's meant to be a KC as well, right? What Lucy did was illegal. A man was accused of an offence, right? And he's got a legal right to defend himself in a court of law. The police started the criminal proceedings against him, right, to investigate it and try him. And what Lucy Fraser did, as a member of the government, who aren't, whenever you write to the government, to Parliament, and say, can I bill out of prison, please, or, can I get off community service? So, no, we don't get involved in legal cases, we have to let them run their course, right? So they don't want to get involved, right? But Lucy Fraser, I'll get involved, right? I'll get involved in this. Russell Brand's been accused of an offence, right? I'll involve myself in this. No need to write to me, I'll write to you, right? And what she's actually done is the defendant, she has caused the defendant, right, before he's even been in front of a court, to suffer injury and damages, financial injury and damages, right, through her actions. Financial injuries and damages to an individual, right, from her actions as a member of Parliament, involving herself in a judicial process, right, which requires consent from the Speaker of Parliament. Because in that debate for ULEZ, they said, we're going to talk about ULEZ. There's a case currently going on alongside in the Royal Courts of Justice, and we're not allowed to touch upon it because it might affect the case somehow or the either party without permission from the Speaker, right? So how has Lucy Fraser been able to act on effect against a person in a live ongoing case, right, without permission from the Speaker? How is it possible? And why does Keir Starmer want similar type of powers? Powers that, Michael Grade of Yarmouth want, powers that Tamara Ingram want, powers that Lord Alan Hallam wants, powers that Karen Baxter wants, powers that Natalie Black wants, powers that Melanie Dawes wants, Angela Dean wants them, Bob Downes wants them, Will Harding wants these powers, Sir Clive Jones wants them, Ben Warrenshire wants them, Keir Starmer wants them. He's trying to get them put through now, right? Keir Starmer, I'm quite surprised that he hasn't already started trying to put a bill through to abolish the courts, when, Sir Brian Leveson was doing an independent review of the courts. Why doesn't Keir Starmer just draft up a bill and try and put it through tomorrow and say, no, we're not having courts anymore. I'm putting a board together called Courtcom, and they're just going to, have a look around on internet, browse, and I hope they don't they're just going to take it down, like YouTube, like Neil Mohan. No, you don't like that. But on what criteria are they going to do this, Keir? Well, further providing, they're going to be like good Samaritans, we're going to give them protection from civil liability for operations or interactive computer services, for voluntary good faith, removal of moderation, third-party criteria, anything that they consider obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessive, violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. Isn't that what they're doing now, Ofcom, apparently, without a fair trial? Ironically, in politics, in political actions, in using Parliament through the law of agency, right, under the Bill of Rights, the main I've got a picture. I might put this up actually because it's important. Right, so this is actually probably the most, after all that, like going off topic and then coming back on topic again and sort of talking around the houses or whatever, trying to get back onto that Section 230 and the American government and YouTube and political material online, right? This is very important because what this is, right, is of the parliamentary law of agency, right? So that is if you're, the law of the Constitution, basically, right? For elections and petitions and things like that, right? So, for the parliamentary law of agency, right? The principle of this law, right? Degrees of agency, right? Agents of agents, and then here we have this, right? Now, this is actually quite concerning to do with that Section 230 in America, right? Particularly the part on YouTube and constitutional law, right? Because what it says here, right, particular things from which agency may be inferred, right? Particular things from which agency may be conferred. So it can't be conferred from everything or anything. There are actually only a certain number of things which agency can really be conferred from, right? Inferred from. Because it's like, if you are, doing a petition about, tampon tax, what has it got to do with, scuba diving? Nothing, right? I mean, you're gonna, okay, you might be found, if you get a scuba suit on and go to the beach and then go underwater with like a petition, kind of like clipboard, right? Asking people to sign it. I mean, is it going to be waterproof paper, or is it going to be like, are you going to get them to scribble on your waterproof mobile phone, like digital pen or whatever, or write with their finger? It can be done. It can be done. I mean, if you've got like, if you're in like, well, in England probably not because there aren't any water that's clear enough to see underwater. But I mean, like you're not going to do it in England. I mean, you could do it at the swimming baths, right? You could go to the swimming baths, right? And if it's really busy, right, you could ask people to sign a petition at the swimming baths, and you could probably do it in the water. It is possible. It's unlikely, right? It's unlikely. But, you can't see underwater in England if you go to the beach because the water's not clear, right? Like, if you're in like Malaysia or somewhere or like Thailand, right? You can go into the sea and, you can put goggles on and you can like see coral and the fish and everything, right? So if you had a busy beach, right? I mean, this is like something like the Bond movie, when he's got the car that just drives out the water and he's just casual as if there's nothing wrong. Like, dum-de-dum, he's like, and there's that American police guy on holiday, like big fat guy, and it's just like, everything's normal, there's nothing wrong here, like Jeremy Vine on his penny farthing, it's like, it's like Bond just drives out of the water in a car and straight up onto the, up the beach and up the road as if like he's looking left and right, like as if like he's just a tourist, like there's nothing out of the ordinary, right? I mean, you could go underwater and ask people to sign petitions, but it's unlikely. But if you were doing it, you would be doing it, you would have the clipboard there and you're doing what you say you're doing, right? Even though unlikely, but it's not something that would normally be inferred, right, under the law of agency of Parliament, but it could but not normally, right? But that would fall under canvassing, though. It would be a very exotic, rare, and peculiar variety of canvassing, right? It would be, you can have it, but it's it's a very low occurrence rate. But it's claimable. It's not impossible to claim it, but it's just unlikely, right? But canvassing. So canvassing, being on committees, right? That's agency. So like investigations of committees. Committees is investigations as well. Receiving money from the candidate for elections. Expenses, receiving letters of authority from the candidate by incidents from previous election, being an agent for another candidate who was canvassed by notifications of the candidate after the act, persons who are not agents, right? So, but canvassing, right? So, canvassing is like the big thing. So, under the law of agency of Parliament, right, canvassing is one of the big ones, right? Regardless of whether it's for an election, right? Because you can have parliamentary elections, but then you can have parliamentary petitions, because you've got a petition website, right? And they ask you to share it. That's canvassing, right? Sharing it and asking for signatures in public, online, whatever. So canvassing is one of the big ones, right? In fact, for elections, when they've got billboards, when they've got flyers being delivered through doors, you couldn't do an election without canvassing unless you just turn up at the polling station and you don't really know who you're going to vote for till you look at it, and then you just pick one of the people. So canvassing is the main. It's advertising, really, and if people don't know about the petition, then they can't sign it. That's the thing. If they don't know about it, they can't sign it. So, and really, it doesn't have to be an advertisement for it. You could just actually do it with a clipboard in person. So you're going person to person to person, and your speech and voice is the advertisement, right? So if you can't ask people to sign it, you can't do it, right? Because you need to. If you can't raise awareness of it, you're not doing it. Unless it's you yourself with the evidence, So you need to be able to talk to people and ask people to do it, or you can't do it, right? So effectively, you cannot do it without being able to ask people. Canvassing is the big thing. Now, so that means that it involves advertisements. It involves images, right? Pictures, words, possibly videos. So canvassing is critically mandatory to be able to facilitate the function and process of petitioning. Well, on elections, or you won't be able to do it. In fact, you cannot really do election campaigns without canvassing. They're not possible, right? Canvassing is ultimately required, other than, you turn up blind in a polling station and just pick someone that you don't know about because you've never heard of them before, because they weren't allowed to do any canvassing, right? So, let's go. So, canvassing is absolutely critical to make petitions and elections possible. It is the prime main thing. If you can't do artwork and adverts, you can't really do it very well, or you can only do it by yourself, like Solo, Han Solo, right? So coming back to this this American Act, this Section 230 of this Communications Decency Act of 1996, right? So taking into account, right, that canvassing is absolutely mandatory. It's one of the principally core functions of the law of agency. Without canvassing, there isn't really much point to having the law of agency, right? So using constitutional law through the law of agency, being able to use images, film and words, particularly online, not just through the post, it is mandatory, right? So isn't it interesting that this act is saying that someone could remove those things, even if they're constitutionally protected under the law of agency, right? Any platform owner can take that down, right? And it doesn't even have to be, it doesn't have to be lewd, lascivious, filthy, obscene, excessively violent, harassing, or whatever, right? Because if it wasn't any of those things, why would you take it down? And they shouldn't be able to take it down. But if it's constitutionally protected, if it wasn't constitutionally protected, right, then, and it wasn't any of those things, there would be no reason to take it down, right? But this is the thing. If you're never going to be, right, obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, right? If you're never going to do those things, why would you need constitutional protection, right? If you weren't going to be any of those things and you weren't going to be removed, why would you need, and what would be the point in constitutional protection? Well, there won't be any point other than if they were just going to remove them anyway. Now, why would they remove it anyway if it wasn't any of those things? Now, this is when you get onto the point of like opposition, like, oh, I support the Conservatives, and Labour's there, and I don't really want Labour to win, so I'm going to remove their stuff. Now, that would be otherwise objectionable, because Labour might not have anything that is lewd, obscene, filthy, lascivious, excessively violent or harassing, right? But because you didn't want them to beat you and because you wanted them to lose, then you might otherwise be objectionable to their stuff, right? So then you can remove it. But if it's constitutionally protected, even though it's doing nothing wrong, you wouldn't be able to remove it because it's constitutionally protected, even though it's not doing anything wrong, right? And that is where your otherwise objectionable comes in. So I'm starting to think that this is a big political kind of like loophole to, because, the thing behind this is that a lot of times people don't know why their things are getting taken down or when, how or who. We don't even know when you've got this level of hacking, which is, we don't, how Keir Starmer's wanting to do the government now in England is like, he wants that, that's what we like that, otherwise objectionable. This is great. Things can be taken down, even if it's constitutionally protected, without any, liability. And it don't even have to be obscene, lewd, or harassing. It can just be otherwise objectionable. Or, I'm Keir Starmer. I don't like this. I want to take your driving license away because I don't like you because you're conservative. Yes, we can't have any conservatives driving around, can we? And I'm going to take away your bank account money as well and shut your bank account down just because you're a Lib Dem. I can't have them beating me in the next election. I've already sacked all of my own party who voted against me. All of the whips, everyone who voted against me in the chamber has been sacked from the Labour Party and they'll never stand again, This is the thing, yes, we'll get them removed. That was objectionable, they weren't lewd, Keir Starmer, his Labour Party colleagues were not obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent or harassing. But because they didn't vote the way that Starmer wanted, he found otherwise objectionable reasons to remove them. from his party just because they didn't vote the way he wanted, even though they were voted in by their electors to represent the electors, not Starmer, right? This is the thing. You know, I think that Keir Starmer thinks that we are all like his Labour Party MPs, and that if we don't drive how he wants us to drive, or spend our money how he wants us to spend it, that he'll just take your bank account down or take driving license off you. Why? Because I'm Keir Starmer and I'm whipping you. This is the thing. But this is where Keir Starmer, he doesn't know where he is or what he's doing. We're in England, right? In England, we're Magna Carta. No one can be punished in England without a fair trial in a court, right? Supposedly by their own peers, with their equals. And, if you can find me a magistrate who thinks that they are equal, then, you must, no magistrate, no person when you walk into a room who says, stand up, sit down, lay on the floor, all right, sit down. Yes, you want to know, you want to feel. That's not your equal. The jury are equal, right? He's a facilitator, but there is no jury. There are no equals anymore. There's only the majesty. The majesty, Yes, you want to know, you want to 3 bags full, you want to stand up, sit down. Yes, sir. Yes, I've never met anyone as equal to me before. He's like 2 peas in a pod here. I've never met anyone. I've never beholden someone who is as equal to me my entire life. This is the thing. Well, where the jury gone? This is the thing. It's all wrong. It's all gone wrong at some point. It's ridiculous. So I really don't know, and I've got a cold at the moment, and that's why I keep getting strange sounds sometimes, like squeaky sounds, because my nose is a little bit blocked up. So, I mean, it can't be right. But anyway, this Section 230 is flawed, because when someone brings a illegal action against you, if you're using constitutional law, they're committing a criminal offence, right? It's not civil. It's not civil, because if you're in civil proceedings and you can't be arrested or imprisoned, but if you commit a contempt in the courtroom, it becomes criminal and you get arrested, right? And you have to be bailed, like Yaxley Lennon. That happened to Yaxley Lennon. That's what happened to Tommy Robinson. That's why Tommy Robinson is in prison, because of a contempt. But it was a civil matter, I think. But it was in contempt, so it had criminal elements, and that's the only reason he's put in prison. It originally started as civil, but it went into criminal. That's what I think. I'm pretty sure, because otherwise there is no arrest on civil process anymore. So, whether either they were really sneaky and clever and they thought they'd fool everyone, or they actually were dumb and stupid. So YouTube are prosecutable, because a contempt is a criminal offence, right? Therefore, so they might claim that this act allows them to take things down, but you can still do them for it. You can still prosecute them for it, in my opinion. And I really like to see when you end up going into the court and they're getting prosecuted for contempt, and they have to explain why they took it down, because this is the thing. I don't think Neil Mohan actually thinks that he can possibly end up in court. I think that he's read this wrong. And I think that he truly has got Dutch courage, like that he thinks that he couldn't possibly end up in court because it protects him. So it's just not going to happen. It can't possibly be possible. But actually he can. And it is possible because it's criminal. And that means that he's going to have to, therefore, because what they thought is we're never going to have to, there's no chance, not even under the constitutional law, right, where we're ever even going to have to answer for any of these things. That's the thing. if you can't get them into court, right, then they're not civilly liable, right? They're not civilly liable, so they think that we can't end up in court. Now, don't you think that has created an extremely dangerous entity, and that's why they are the ones who are abusing their privileges? Because that means that they're never ever going to have to explain in court, right, whether something was, obscene, lewd, filthy, excessively violent, or harassing. Or, if they did remove it, why did they remove all their other things as well when their other things weren't, when the rest of the items on their channel weren't, right? Because they obviously, if they're not that, then you can leave them up. But then they just say, oh, well, we'll take the whole channel down. Yeah, but the other stuff on the channel is not against these, right? Which is, okay, you got a strike system, fair enough, but so what? But now, if they're actually going to end up in court, which I think they can because they've done something criminal, not civil, right? This means maybe for the first time ever, they're going to have to explain how is it otherwise it's otherwise objectionable. Well, that means they're going to have to explain their objection. That means that if they took my stuff down, like 1 or 2 items for being on that criteria of harassment or whatever it is, right? That means that, well, why did you take the other things down which weren't harassing and so forth? Or, well, we took the rest of the things on the channel down which hadn't broken any of those other criteria just because then we decided that the whole channel was otherwise objectionable. Right, well, let's hear that objection. What's wrong with it? Is there such a thing? And this is like on TuneCore, we can remove your account for any reason or no reason. Oh, well, does that mean that you'd be able to remove it because someone was black? Well, we can have any reason. Yes, so why not? Yeah, but if you did that, then that's discrimination and illegal and criminal. And I've had this argument with TuneCore before. I'm like, you've got a policy which is illegal. It says you can remove something for any reason at all or no reason, right? But the word any literally means actually absolutely anything. So you're claiming that in that claim has to be inclusive of we're saying we can have any reason at all. We could remove something because someone were black, right? We could do that. But that's illegal. It's discrimination. But they're making out they could do it. They're claiming that they can do that, right? But you can't to the current laws. Not in England. It's just discrimination, right? Now, if they did that, then you could prosecute them. But they're claiming in their policy that they can still they can remove it for that reason, but they can't because a citizen has the right to enforce the law. So when they're enforcing the law, they're preventing a crime from happening, right? So that means you can prevent, if you were black and YouTube were going to, obviously they're claiming they could if they wanted to, that they're reckoning they could if they wanted to. That means that if you were black and they took down your music, that means that you would be able to physically intervene and prevent them from doing it because they would be committing a discriminatory crime and an offence. So you can physically prevent them from doing it, law enforcement, right? You could go into a YouTube building and physically stop them from taking your music down if they were going to do it if you were black, right? Which is discrimination, right? So these are the policies that they're coming out with, and these are the policies of these are the policies of Ofcom and Keir Starmer. These are Keir Starmer policies, which they're counterproductive. That you see that they're reckoning that they're creating all these protected characteristics like race, religion, sex, and all these other things. But while they're pretending that they're protecting all these characteristics, right? They're actually coming out with they're getting involved with all these companies that they like that are coming out with these very authoritarian policies, which is saying that effectively they can do what they want. But they can do what they want, but we can't. And what these policies amount to when you get onto any reason or no reason. We can remove your account for any reason or no reason, right? And that effectively is saying what it says here, or otherwise objectionable. Well, or otherwise objectionable. What? Well, anything that we want to come up with, right? Well, what did you come up with? Did you come up with anything? One of my videos, might have been fit those criteria, right? So you had the right to remove that according to this section 230. But why did you remove the rest of the channel, right? Oh, it was otherwise objectionable. Well, what objection do you have to it? Have you got one? And I think that they probably wouldn't have one, because and if they truly believe that they couldn't possibly end up in court, even if they broke constitutional law, they've never even worked out what their reason is going to be. They've not even worked out, how they're going to define otherwise objectionable in a court and argue it. How are they going to argue that it was otherwise objectionable? That means that they could actually have anything they want. Now, the thing with constitutional law is that it removes you from being accountable to the courts, because it's under the law of Parliament, right? You're not accountable in the courts. Now, I think that this is what these people who did this 1996 Act were thinking. They were like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could remove the accountability from the courts of these big platforms, right? Then they can just do what they want, right? And in a way, what it's done is, instead of all the citizens having individual power, should they choose to engage in politics. You remember, 1/3 of people don't even bother voting, so a lot of people aren't interested in, starting to get towards 2/3 now. Not people are interested in politics, even if they wanted to be, right? It's hard to get some people interested in politics, right? So, but that means that every single citizen's individual right to take up, a political pursuit, a political action, to ask the government for something, it is being extinguished by one big entity, right? And it's not even Bill Gates himself in person. It's not like, Bill Gates, Big Bill, Big Bill's votes worth 500 normal citizens' votes, it would be all right, if it was a $50 bill, versus a $1 bill, it's like, well, Bill Gates is worth $50 bill, Bill's vote's worth more than your vote, right? But this is a corporate entity. This is just a business. It's not even a person. It can be bought and sold, Sergey Brin could sell YouTube to, Huckleberry Finn or something, He could sell it to, Erwin R. Schneider. He could give it to charity, It can exchange ownership. A company. A company is not registered to vote. Right? YouTube LLC, right, is not registered to vote. It's not even on the electoral register. It's not an American citizen. YouTube LLC, right, can be bought and sold on the stock exchange. It could be owned by Sergey Brin one day, or Donald Trump could own it, or it could be owned by, Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, or it could be owned by, Kid Rock. It's not a registered electoral vote. It could be sold to someone in Iceland. YouTube could be floated on the stock exchange and sold to Putin could buy it, right? Putin could buy all the shares of YouTube and own it, right, if he had enough money, right? It could be Russian-owned, right? Now, that would be funny, wouldn't it? So, is Donald Trump telling me, right, that if Putin bought YouTube now, and I know that he's been ditching McDonald's and everything, getting rid of all American stock market, but theoretically, right, it doesn't have to be Putin. It could be, I don't know, some Saudi Arab or whatever. I don't know. It could be, it could be Albanese or something in Australia, right? Whoever, right? It could be someone on Fiji, or whatever. Let's say Putin, because a business is a business, right? Business is business, money is money, right? Let's say Putin buys YouTube, like Elon bought Twitter, right? There's nothing really stopping him from buying it. It's just a company, right? It's a company, right? Surely. If Putin bought YouTube, right, that would be funny, because then Putin can say, hey, I am Russian, right? Ha ha ha, I own YouTube. And he could say, well, I'm protected from civil liability from removing all your stuff, otherwise objectionable or not. Haha, try to find that. Whether or not your material is constitutionally protected. Then I'd like to see Biden or, Nancy Pelosi. What would Nancy Pelosi say to that? Well, she might want to petition Mr. Putin about it. Well, she won't be petitioning him on fucking YouTube, will she? Right? Hey, Nancy, you genius. Hey, Nancy, you're such a genius. Mr. Putin has bought YouTube, and whether or not you're constitutionally protected material or not, well, tough, it's not allowed on there, and you can't sue him. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. Who's the mastermind behind that act of law, right? Did they think of that? So Elon, right? He could give Twitter to Putin. There you go. And by the way, Putin can block whatever he wants, whether it's reasonably objectionable or otherwise, even if it's against the Constitution, but you can't sue him, right? Nancy Pelosi would soon be, doing the moonwalk then, wouldn't she? Like, hee, let's go backwards. This is the thing. They don't think about what they're doing. You can't have an entity which is not even it's not even an American citizen. It's not an American citizen, and it's not. So how can it block constitutionally protected material? It's not even registered to vote. It doesn't have an American vote against other American citizens. It doesn't actually. It doesn't have a vote. I mean, you could give all the shares of YouTube to your pet cat, right? If you wanted to. If Elon had a pet dog, right, and he was a bit of a nutcase, he could say, my dog's going to inherit Twitter. And you could do it on paper. You could say that all Twitter shares are owned by my dog, right? But his dog, a dog can't be registered to vote in America. Only humans can. So how could a dog that owns Twitter possibly ban people's constitutionally protected material, right, and protect themselves from being prosecuted when then they're not even a registered voter in America? It's a dog with a company, It's not even It's not even opposition. It's not. It can't even vote against you, At least if it's Bill Gates, At least if Bill Gates says, I'm Bill Gates, he's a person, This is the thing. Companies aren't people. It's the people that use the companies. Now, you could say that Neil Mohan is an American voter and Carol Vasquez is, right? But what you're actually doing is, by having them in charge of the company and then saying that the company is under these conditions, they're actually effectively like driving around in a tank. And what they're doing is they're cancelling out everyone's political voice, right? So it's like, but it's not even, their tank, they're being commanded by someone else, This is the thing. They're actually snuffing out everyone's political voice and opinion with no defence. With this big tank power they've got, and it's only a bunch of people driving it. And when it comes to politics, it's always vote versus vote. It's not they're not a court. They haven't been given powers. I wouldn't mind, but in England at least, in England, at least you've got these charters, right? So you've got the Charter of the City of London, and the City of London will have a mayor, and, the mayor shall be a justice of the peace, and he shall have power to try cases. They haven't even, like the BBC have got a charter. In America, they haven't even really, this Department of Justice has reviewed Section 2030 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. It's just an act of law, and that applies to all platforms. It's an act of law which even applies to people's own private forum. Administrators of forums. It's like it's like everyone can use it, but when YouTube use it, they've got so much capacity and power, and it's not just that. People have got a lot of work, years and years and years of work and memories and their whole life that is invested into one channel, that if someone just snuffs it out, it's like coming into your house and taking all your furniture. And in America, you can protect, if someone comes into your house, you can shoot them, right, to defend your property. But it's like, you can't shoot Neil Mohan if he just takes like 10 years of your life. They don't have any right to that stuff, and for them to have the policy, right, that policy is illegal, because at the moment they write it and draft it, right, this whole constitutional protection is only for the removal. This Section 230 is the removal of constitutional protected stuff, but it doesn't say about how do you get it on there, right? They're saying that they can remove it whether it's constitutionally protected or not, right? But how did you get it on there? How did you load it? How did you load the platform up? How did you get all that material on there? Well, you had to first open an account, and then you do it through an agreement. But what's the agreement? The agreement is, well, these are our policies and you will abide by them, right? Well, in England, if anyone would serve to obstruct or hinder your petition campaign, that is contempt, right? So to reach out to you with such an agreement that if you consented to it would obstruct you, that is contempt, right? So the policy of YouTube is illegal. To join it under that policy in England is a criminal offence for them to have and offer that policy, right, to apply to political material. They can't have it, right? So to get your stuff up onto there under that policy, they've committed a contempt already, right? Before they even get anywhere near removing it. And there's nothing in this Section 230 that it's all about removal, only about removal, right? Not about getting it on there, right? So they broke the law by having the policy in England. They broke the law by having the policy, right? So, it's all about the removal, right? And I think they're stealing your stuff, They don't own your stuff. They don't own it. The policy is illegal. They don't own any of that media. They've got no rights over it. And all this does is saying that, they can remove it without civil suit. But they never thought about how you're going to get it up on there. So they've already broke the law and they're already committing contempt. And the policy isn't valid. So they're not protected from stealing, destroying your stuff. And this doesn't say anything about destroying it. It only says removal. It says removal of material. What are they going to do with it when it's removed? Is it damaged? Is it destroyed? Doesn't give them any right to destroy it or damage it, right? Only remove it. So where they're storing it. So immediately, if they destroy or damage any evidence or people's things, they're breaking the law on that as well. This only says removal. It doesn't give them any right to destroy it or damage it, right? So there are many flaws in this act which just don't work. They're not functional. It's a ridiculous and stupid act. It's like some kind of it's like a bluff or a blag act. In fact, who came up with this act? What senators came up with it? It would be interesting to know who came up with it in 1996. I'll type in who was the president. It would have been Donald Trump, because it wasn't. He was only more in the 2000s. Who was the? I don't think it was Obama either. Who was the? Don't tell me it was Tony Blair and what do you call him? Clinton, or was it Clinton? Bill Clinton, or the other guy who was in the same time as Blair. President of USA 1996. Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton. That's it. It was a Clinton policy. Also, it's like Hillary Clinton. It's Bill and Hillary Clinton. It's a Bill and Hillary Clinton policy. They were Republicans, though. Oh, no, sorry, and went on to defeat Republican President George H.W. Bush. So they were Democrats. The Democrats came up with it. So it's like Biden, isn't it, and crew. It's like Biden, Hillary Clinton, and Nancy Pelosi and so forth. They came up with it. Can't be legal. It just cannot possibly be lawful. And all the material that people have had nicked, effectively, right, if you've got a channel with, 5,000-10,000 videos that is your work and you don't have backup of it because you drive, disk drives are expensive, so they're just stealing it. All your things, stealing all your stuff. They don't have the right to do that. They only have the right to remove it, not destroy or damage it. So, and it is criminal. It actually is criminal. They've been so confident that I think Sergey Brin has been so egotistical that, like, I'm flying. It's like 1 minute I'm just Sergey, and the next minute I'm like Superman. It's like, oh, I'm a global player. I'm knocking around, these big international meetings, and like I'm a big world player, like Mark Zuckerberg and World Economic Forum and World Health Organization. That he think, and then apparently even when people do take him to a court, he's got that many houses that they can't even serve the documents on him or whatever. Right? This is the problem with these people. They think they're. It's like that on that. What's it called? Skyfall? Is it Skyfall? Not Skyfall. GoldenEye. On that GoldenEye, when they got that Boris guy clicking his pen, Boris is invincible. That's Sergey Brin, and it is Boris is invincible. Sergey Brin clicking his pen. Like, how many clicks is it? 1 click, 2 click, 3 clicks, and it's like, oh, the pen's going to blow up like an exploding pen. Like click, 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 click. This is the thing. And this is what happens with people like Neil Mohan and Carol Vasquez, that they think they're indestructible through the law, but actually it turns out they're not. They're criminal. And this is the thing. So this law is defective on multiple points, where it just doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up when the full extent of the law is understood.